Sometimes we're not quite there yet, and we're making steps to get there. But anyway, we've got time and we've got impact. And what we have to recognize is that when we first get into a job, our impact is going to be low. And that really makes sense. At the company, we're making the transition into the world of work. We're learning about the job, right? So learning. And that's what's expected of us. But at some point, we should be like, all right, we're hitting our stride. We're gaining proficiency. We're gaining confidence. And now we can start to make an impact. And so now we rise up. But what also happens, and I've seen this many, many times, I've experienced it myself, is that at some point that starts to level off and it starts to stabilize. And this can happen for a number of reasons. It can happen because of something about you as an individual. You're bored, you've gotten comfortable, but it also could be something about the work, like the work is no longer needed. So for instance, if you've got a job where you're brought in to fix something that was broken, create new processes, and now those processes are created or the thing that was broken is fixed, your work is no longer needed. And so you're going to have these plateaus. Again, the automation, new technology is going to create these plateaus. So now the question is, what do you do? Because if you're reaching one of these plateaus, you're at risk. Right? So what's going to happen now is it for that particular job, your impact can actually regress. And that's why I say you're at risk. So instead, what you want to be able to do is recognize kind of when you're coming to one of those plateaus and be able to go, wait, I need to prepare and get ready for the next opportunity and essentially start to string together a series of curves. And I wish I could draw this better because in a way, this almost still looks like that career path because it still has this upward progression. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it is that same progression. It's really about taking who you are and what you've learned and transitioning into that next thing, getting off the ground in that next thing, getting up and running and going. The other thing that's off about this particular image is, and this is really going to my own skills as a graphic designer, which are this big. It implies that all of these curves are equal in size, and they're not. You might have one that is very long and that has a very long time that you're adding impact before it tapers off. And then your next one might be short. It might be a transitional role where maybe you're going to go into a company or a role or your function. You're going to do something quick and then move to the next. Or maybe you're like, look, I want to try something new. And so I'm going to experiment with a new function, which is great. And that still can have real personal impact. And that might be short, or maybe it's going to be long, right? But in the meantime, if we think about curves, what's really nice about a curve is that when you reach one of these bends and you recognize it's normal, you're not falling off like something linear, but you're curving. And I also like it too. I think about this sometimes when I'm like out hiking. When you're out hiking and you're coming to a bend and you really don't know what's around that curve and you walk around the curve and suddenly there's this gorgeous, stunning view that you didn't expect. Well, that's what this curve metaphor allows as well, which is this idea of maybe you had a plan, but then you go around a curve and you're like, it might be like, oh, I didn't expect a plateau. I didn't expect this change that's coming. And you go around the bend and you're like, wait, this is awesome. Look what's here and waiting for me, right? And so it can create some joy and some excitement as opposed to feeling of failure. So now let me share with you some stories. Actually, I'm going to pause just for a moment. But I have some stories I want to share to bring this to life. But first, I want to pause and see if there are any questions or anything, any comments. Anybody want to go, yes, I identify with this. Anything? I even think probably for many of you, you might be identifying with this in the sense of going, look, I started my career doing one thing and now I'm going, quote, back to school I'm going to tell you why. I put that in air quotes because why is it back? You're actually going forward to school. You're not going back to school. You're going forward. And so, right, that too can be part of these curves. While you're in school, you may think I'm going into human resources to be a generalist. And you're like, wait, there's a way I can specialize. That's much more exciting. Be open to these ideas. Anything anybody wants to add?
Yeah.
I just want to say I totally identify with this. With no straight line CV, for example. And I can tell you it's really exciting. It can be risky, it can be worrisome, but it's really exciting because that's life, right? So life is exciting and a career is part of life. So yeah, I totally identify with this. And I'm happy that you shared it with us today.
Well, and when I love sharing with it, like to normalize it. Because the path part seems, and I'll get you in one minute, Georgia. But the path thing is what we all think is normal, and when we recognize that no, like this is actually what's normal. Then when we're doing these curves, right? You can go like this. I'm fine. I'm normal, and yeah, it can seem risky, but it seems risky because it's not that other paradigm, right? When it's this, the other part I think about risk is. We can't expect other people to understand all of our curve choices, right? So for instance, you already heard I started my career as a lawyer and I chose not to be a lawyer. I actually could tell my first year in law school that it was the wrong thing for me. But I decided to stick it out because I actually decided that graduating and finishing and then deciding to do something else was actually going to be a more powerful story to tell about myself than I quit. And I'm actually really glad that I did that story. But the part that's risky is quitting law. Oh, no, don't do that. I've always wanted to be a lawyer, Beth. I'm so envious of you that you got to be a lawyer. Don't quit. Well, wait, that's their story. That's not my story. And maybe law would have been right for them, maybe not, but I've learned it's not right for me. Or people would say, this was one of my favorites. Are you sure? Are you sure you want to leave law? And it took every bit of self-control I had to not say to them, I invested 3 years of my life and a lot of money to go to law school. I would not be walking away from this, like willy-nilly. Like, do you really think that I am that, like flaky? Like, no, of course I've thought about this. This is a big decision. So don't expect that everybody else is going to understand why something isn't right for you. But also, too, don't expect them to understand that you see an opportunity that other people don't yet see. So that was a big part. Like, that's a big thing I learned in my world of startups. So back in 2010, when I joined Tesla, actually it was 2011 when I joined Tesla, I distinctly remember a friend of mine saying to me, electric cars? Do you think people want electric cars? Like, is this even how would this even work? How would there be infra? People don't want electric cars. Beth, what are you doing? But of course, there were a whole group of other people who could see the path isn't completely cut yet, but we've got the right tools. We're going to chop down the obstacles, the trees. We're forging a new path. And do people want electric cars? Yeah, we just have to create it, right? So not everybody's going to see that path, see that opportunity, and they certainly don't understand all of the different motivations that make you, you. Georgia. And again, I hope I said it right.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks. Okay. So what happens if when you hit that plateau, you are in the plateau, but you don't know where to go and you have no clue?
Excellent question. I love this question so much that last night when I was thinking about this session, I thought to myself, don't forget to tell them about informational interviewing. And so you just gave me that perfect time. So again, I always like stories. So informational interviewing, a lot of people have heard about informational interviewing. But they put the emphasis on the wrong word. they put the emphasis on interview as opposed to information. And so let me tell you what informational interviewing is. And, again, it was an essential part of how I moved from law to HR. And even though I made this move 30 years ago, oh my God. Right. And I will say that even though the world has changed a lot since then, this part I think has not changed. So the idea of informational interviewing is it's about getting information. And you start with just a kernel of an idea. And you think, I think I'm plateauing and I'm looking for ways to take what I currently am doing and, oh boy, there's this new thing over there. What is that? Take that kernel and then go find people who are already playing in that sandbox that you're considering. And say to them, I want to learn more. Or maybe they're doing a job, what it is that you do, how you spend a typical day, how you got where you are, right? And that's what you're looking to find out is what is it that these other people are doing? And if you're listening to them, you're going to be able to say, what are some missing pieces that I may need, to be able to make myself eligible to be able to do that? Or maybe, in fact, I'm eligible now. How do I find these opportunities? But you're going to be learning from them. What is the actual work? What are those opportunities? What are some next stepping stones? And here's what's especially cool about informational interviewing is sometimes people will say, oh, but this person I want to talk to is in my dream company. And I don't want to close off that opportunity to get into my dream company. Well, the people you're talking to, they're pretty smart. And if you come across as savvy, ambitious, smart, and they're talking to you and they've got an opportunity, they're going to say in the course of that conversation, hey, Georgia, we actually have an opportunity coming up that might really be what you're looking for. So if there's that opportunity, even though you didn't go in with that career intent, that specific interview intent, they're going to tell you about it. The other thing too about informational interviewing is it's always a good idea when you're talking to somebody to ask during the course of the conversation who else they recommend you can talk to. So you can say, oh, right, boy, this was really helpful. Here, I'll actually, this is really helpful. Are there other people that you can recommend? I really want to learn more about this part of what you were just telling me. Are there people you can recommend that I can talk to? Yeah, let me introduce you to so-and-so. And they will start this engine running of introducing you to more and more people. And so the power of informational interviewing to keep learning what's going on is just super strong, and how you can transition what you're already doing into that next thing. So I hope that helps.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Does that say Dina?
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted you said you worked only for 1 year in law, but what about people who worked for like 15 years? Like that, you worked only for 1 year, which is very short. But when people have worked for a long time and you say to your friends or, oh, I'm thinking about changing career, they tell you, oh, who's gonna hire someone who's 38 when they can hire someone who's 21? No one's gonna hire you. So I don't recommend you do a career change at this point. I want to ask you about time, because you started talking about people who just graduated, but what about people who are in the middle of this? Like, yeah, how can they?
I get it. It's a wonderful, again, a wonderful question. And I'll be honest, I'm not making episodes of my podcast anymore. This is the name of my podcast, Career Curves. I'm not making episodes anymore, but I did for 2 years interviewing people. And I interviewed people at all different stages of their career. I interviewed some people who were pretty young and who were figuring it out. But I also talked to some people who made major changes well into their 30s or 40s, or even later than that. And it happens all the time. And so again, unfortunately, when you're talking to these other people, the ones who want to say, 38, first of all, 38 is still young. I'll take it from me who's well past that. 38 is still young. But I get it, right? I mean, the stories we hear in our, it isn't young. Or exactly what people might be saying, to you, like, well, 15, why would you change now? And who's going to want you? What I would say there is each of us in our unique lives and our unique stories, experiences, 15 years of experience is wonderful, right? It has taught you things that person that's earlier in their career doesn't know. So what do I mean by that? I had this experience once. I was much later in my career, and I'm talking to somebody who's more junior in their career, and we're talking through some problem solving, and I go, oh, you know what else we need to plan for is this. Oh, and we also need to plan for this that might happen. And they're like, this that might happen. They're like, boy, Beth, you have this amazing ability to see around corners, to anticipate what's going to happen, right? To see around corners. And I said, that's because I've been around the block, right? I know there's a Starbucks around the corner because I've gone around this corner before. And so this idea when we're 38 and making these changes, or later in our career and making these changes, we actually some skills and experience that make us powerful. And what we need to do is be able to figure out the story that makes us powerful. So the problem when we're making the change at 38 or whatever later might be, I'm holding on to your 38 number, but whatever later might be. The problem is we can't necessarily expect that recruiter or whoever's making the job decision, we can't expect that they're going to knit together or connect the dots of our life and our story and figure out how those dots lead to the job they have now. So what we need to do is we need to craft our story and tell it to somebody else in a way that makes it easy for them to connect the dots. So here's what I mean about that. I started my career as a lawyer because I really wanted to get involved in helping people. And I thought law was going to be a great way to help people. When I got into it, what I discovered was that it was really a lot more about research. And it was actually a very slow machine for solving problems and helping people. Like a typical case could take 5 years. And what I learned about myself was that I'm a bit more of an action junkie. And I like to be able to help people more immediately and also solve problems a little bit more creatively as opposed to based on precedent, which is law. So this is why I'm looking now for a career in HR. Because when I've talked to other people, informational interviewing, when I've talked to other people in HR and I've heard how it is about very much solving the business problems of today and helping people, I've realized that that's a much better fit for my temperament and my skills. But what's cool is because I've got this law background, it's going to help me understand the nuances related to that employee-employer contract that we have when we're working with employees. So that's why I'm looking to make this move and how my background makes me a stronger candidate for what you're looking for. So that's just like an example of how I'm going to take my experience and my knowledge of myself and knit together this story. And the same thing can happen, with that 15 years of experience. I've been doing this for 15 years and it has been a wonderful journey and a wonderful career. These are things I've learned. These are things I've learned about myself. And now what I've also learned about myself is that while that's been wonderful, I'm really ready for this next adventure. And so I want to take this that I enjoy doing and this that I know about my temperament and apply it in this new area. And here's how I see that. And so you're going to tell that story that helps other people go, of course. And there's lots and lots that you can do later. And in fact, more and more people are going to be doing this because more and more of those 15-year jobs are now going to be going away. Does that help and make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Other thoughts? So I love this because through these questions and things that you've been asking, you've actually covered a lot of the things that I was going to share, but I'm still going to share these things. I'm just going to do it a little bit more quickly. But I'm going to share with you. So this is actually the origin story for career curves. And I like it as yet another way to illustrate everything that we're talking about. So one picture looks a bit like me, see? And the other picture was my career curves partner, a guy named Dan. And I met Dan at the Gap when I was starting in my career. And so here I was, an entry level HR person. By the way, I took a 50% cut in pay when I left law to go into HR. Another thing that people would say,
yeah,
right? Oh my God, you're crazy. What are you doing? But I knew, I was like, I only have one life to live. I hope that's wrong. I hope I've got more lives to live, but I only think I have one. And so this, I had to make this change. I couldn't do law. I didn't care. I knew too that I would rebuild. I was, it was the right time. But anyway, so here Dan and I were, and we were both junior in our careers. He also was junior in HR. And so now here it is 25 years later, Dan and I have come back together to do this, to do a podcast. We actually thought we were going to do a very different podcast than what we did. But what happened is we were reconnecting and we were telling our stories. Gosh, Dan, where have you been? What have you been doing since we started our work together? And I had told him how I started, at the Gap, started actually in law, as you guys know, but I went from Gap to being a consultant. As a consultant, I found out that people were hiring me for what I had already knew how to do, and I wasn't growing. And so I went back inside a company and I went into Apple, and I took an in-house job again. And there I really built some new skills around leadership development. And I got to work in the Apple retail stores, and help them. And that was exciting. Then again, I went to consulting. Then I went into Microsoft and I helped them as a startup build their retail, everything I knew from Apple and their stores. And I went into podcast and teaching. Right. So I learned about myself, this idea of creating from nothing was me, and that I was really well suited to early stage endeavors. Dan, on the other hand, in all that time since I had worked with him, he curved from inside the company. So he stayed at Gap for 25 years. And he went from employee relations and he moved up in human resources while getting his MBA. But then even in Gap, he left that and went to corporate, started getting into what's the right way to treat not his employees, but vendors, employees, and factories around the world? Or what's the way to do sustainable sourcing of fabrics so that the clothes we create are sustainable? How did he curve inside the company? He started putting himself on committees that were a combination of people in HR and people who were working with factories and people who were working with fabrics. And then when those opportunities came up and he was like, I've thought about making those changes. They're like, Dan, we've loved working with you, right? So they actually could see too, going back to George's question, how he was actually a good fit, even though he had this very rich, long career, Dina, in HR and moved into social responsibility. He ultimately moved back to HR and was the head of HR for Gap worldwide. And then ultimately went to president of Gap Foundation, so the donation arm of the Gap. And so here inside a company, he made these curves. So really important to know, right? It can happen outside, it can happen inside. So Dan and I just got really excited by this idea that you could have fulfilling careers in so many different ways. I mentioned to you that we also talked to people who were early in their career. So one of the episodes that we did was with a guy named Corey Lambert. At the time, Corey was 32, I think. He's probably 35 now. But he was somebody riding the tech wave. And so let me tell you really quickly Corey's story. He was an English major. He graduated with no idea about what he wanted to do. And he graduated back back in about 2009, 2010, in the middle of the recession. So a very scary time, not different perhaps than the scary times we have today. So at that time, though, because it was a recession, he took any job that he could. And so he took a job working in marketing and events, was liking it. But then he saw a video about Square and that Square reader that was being created for, taking credit cards on iPhones. And he reached out to them in this informational interview way with interest and excitement. And somebody from that company was like, hey, you're a really cool guy. We've got this event coming up in Chicago where you are. Come meet me at this event. Let's have coffee. And so he just started talking with them and ultimately got hired to their facilities team. He knew nothing about facilities, but they could see from his marketing that he knew how to put pieces together. And they're like, this will work. He really was enjoying facilities. But inside the company, they were like, hey, facilities is great, but the real excitement is really more on the tech. Right? Because here he is, he's in Square. You should be working with the engineering team. So he got a job with the engineering team as a testing coordinator. And he hated it. Learned about himself. You know something? I like facilities. I like it's dynamic. I get to work with different executives. And so he left what everybody else said was cool, went back to facilities, and since then has done that not only at Square, but at Lyft and Cloudflare. And so what I really like about Corey's story is that it illustrates something that's really important for us. To our own careers, we are responsible for our own development. We may think that it's the organization or we may think that it's our manager, but it's really us because nobody knows our interests, our needs, our constraints, our personal goals, what personal impact looks like for us. Nobody knows this as much as we do. Now, our organizations can help us, our managers can help us, but really you own your career. And you can see that in that story with Corey. One more really quick story. I'll take less than a minute to share it with you because I just loved this one too. This is another one like Dina, Marcus had to curve well into his 40s. Marcus was a dentist. So talk about somebody who thought he was going to be on one career forever. I'm a dentist. I'll be a dentist forever. And then in his 40s, he started getting tremors. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to go to a dentist who's tremoring. Oops, right? And in fact, the very first time he went to a doctor to talk about his tremors, the immediate impact of that is they have to report that to the state, and his license to practice dentistry got suspended. And so he curved. And what he did is he discovered he really enjoyed the business side of dentistry and ended up leading a practice and building out a practice. But he also was like, I've also had this interest in having an organic toothpaste and haven't been able to give that any time. And so he also developed an organic toothpaste. So he took what he knew about dentistry and applied it in new ways. Right. So what we see here is that a career path is a terrible metaphor. Real careers are curvy. We need an evolutionary mindset. We need to continuously learn about ourselves. Nobody knows you. People are well-intended in giving you that advice. They may be scared to curve at 38 years old, but you may know, I have no choice. I'm so unhappy, or I see an opportunity, right? They're not you. So continuously learn about yourself. And your journey is going to be uniquely your journey, especially in this new and evolving world. So look at that. We had discussion. I got through everything I had. We've got a couple more minutes, I think, for some questions. There's me if you want to connect, but I'm going to end my sharing. Any more questions? Any other thoughts?
I think we have someone.
This topic. Yeah, Dina, do you have another question, or is your hand up still from that other one?
Okay.
Okay. No, she's okay. Anything else?
Questions, comments?
So with all of this in mind, I will say, like I said, going forward to school, don't we need to create that? Like, we need to make that an expression. I've never used that expression before, but I'm going to use it now. Going forward to school is such a cool thing to do. And frankly, and I'm going to pitch IE. You guys are all already, IE, you're hooked on IE. And I'll also talk about even evolutionary. IE is such a cool place to do it. You're going to meet people from all over the world. You're going to meet people from different programs. Note them down. They're the people you're going to informationally interview with in the future, right? They're the people who, with a professor or somebody, to be able to go, boy, you just told me that you do, I'm going to use for my friend Dan, corporate social responsibility. I never heard of this before. I'd love to learn more about what that is. You can start that informational interviewing even now, just to be able to go, what is that? And you might find out that there's something out there that's far more interesting and intriguing. And IE is such an amazing place to do it because of the people you're going to meet as your peers, as your professors, as your guest speakers. All of those people are coming in because they too are committed to this evolutionary idea and helping everybody grow. And IE is also such an evolving organization that this evolutionary mindset is within the school. The program that I'm a part of, Talent Development in HR, started, I think about 5 years ago. And is a very different program now because of this evolutionary mindset. It just keeps getting better and stronger. So going forward with your education is such an amazing way to launch all kinds of future curves. Not one. My last piece of advice is there are lots of right next moves. So anytime you need to make a move, make the best decision you can with the information you have. You're going to learn something from that about yourself, about an industry, and then you're going to go. And then you're going to make your right next move based on all the information you have at that point. But that together is going to create these curves. Anything else?
Anyway, don't worry that you can free to reach out to her. I mean, on the podcast, on LinkedIn. I mean, of course, Beth is always more than welcome to help our students. So we're running out of time. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the session. And it seems that there's a lot of questions and discussions. So this is something that we love here from IE. The idea is to actually the professor help the debate and solve many of your questions. So thank you again for everybody. Thank you, Beth, for your time. Hopefully everybody enjoyed the session.
Yeah. Sorry, one more quick thing. I just opened up chat because maybe somebody didn't hear that I had closed it. I see there's a question on chat that I didn't get to. If you like Matthias just said, reach out. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can send me that exact question on LinkedIn, and I would be more than happy to answer it. So even though we didn't have time today.
Don't worry. Well, thank you very much, Beth, and thank you, everybody. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, Beth. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.